I don't know if always we're clear about what we actually do want. We're clear
Yeah.
about what we think we should want. Like, I should want this kind of career. I should want this kind of family dynamic. I should want this. But that's why you see people uncomfortable in their jobs or in their, circumstances, because they're like, I'm doing what I thought I should want. And this actually wasn't what I really wanted.
I think it's no secret that I love the Little Words Project's bracelets. I have about 6 or 7 on my arm, ones that have been given to me, ones I've bought myself. I love giving them as gifts. I think they're so inspirational for me personally. They're nice little reminders throughout my day to have hope, to be, have strength, to be in good energy. I just love the bracelets so much. I love giving them. I love receiving them. And if you want to check them out and you want to give it as a gift or get one for yourself, you can use our code QTC for 15% off your first order.
It's so interesting because when I started this particular page, I guess the way it is, it wasn't always like self-care, self-growth, and all of those things. So I was an event planner and a creative director. And I made this decision to pivot in my business. And so didn't know what was on the other side. I just said, hey, I just feel led to do this. It felt aligned with me. And so I archived everything on my page and started from one post. And my friends were like, what are you doing? And I was like, I just feel like I don't want to confuse people. If I said I'm going in this lane, I don't want them seeing event planning, creative directing, and be like, well, wait, she says she's in the self-care wellness space. And not that I can't do them all, but page sake, I just wanted to try to give some kind of clear delineation. And so it started from there, just kind of growing. At that time, I was probably around, I want to say anywhere between 5,000, 7,000 followers. Or community members, as I like to say. And I was grateful. I'm grateful for one person that wants to sit around and take anything that I have to say to heart. And so to have that many, it was like, wow. And then as I just kept sharing more and showing up, as I said to a friend of mine, in a very, what I like to say, aggressive way, because I was always posting. And I feel like people don't hear you unless they see you. And so I'm like, well, they're going to see me. They're going to see me. They're going to hear me. They're going to feel me. And I'm just going to keep showing up. And whoever's supposed to get it is going to get it. So my pivot came because I was an event planner. I was a creative director. And essentially, I was hired to take on someone else's stress. And I realized that although I'm taking on their stress, what am I doing with my own? And so I knew that I had to start making myself a priority in the list of priorities in my life. Not just my clients, not just my business, not my family, my friends, but also myself. And so that didn't mean that they weren't a priority, just meant that I am also. And taking better care of myself meant that I was better off for it. I was a better, business owner, a better friend, a better daughter, etc. And so I saw in doing that, as I was working with my clients still in the event space and in the creative director space, I would talk to my clients and I'd ask them how they were. And many of the clients I had were female. And so I'd ask them, how are they? And they'd tell me how their businesses were or how their careers are going, right? They'd lead with that, how their families are doing, but how are you? And so it reminded me of myself in listening to them. I felt like I know that person because I once upon a time was that person where I led with everything else but how I was, because ultimately I really probably wasn't sure how I was because I really wasn't checking in with myself.
I also think we're not told or taught to check in with ourselves. And,
No.
As upsetting as it is to hear like women or people you're working with lead with,
Yeah.
It's unsurprising. And I would probably answer the question the same way without more thoughtfulness and intention to check in with myself. But I think this sort of aligns with this idea of the societal timelines and what we identify as success. So it's like, we don't think self first. We don't check in with self. It's like where the accomplishment is, how is the business doing? How is my relationship doing? Or where am I lining up in terms of like the societal, expectations?
Yeah, success is external versus rather us seeing like there's a level of success internally by just how well you're taking care of yourself. And so I realized, I started feeling this this kind of intuition of I should help these women in this capacity. So that's how the
Mhm.
pivot started happening. Was again, I started with me first because I needed to have something to be able to share. I need to know that this can work. And so I was just like, the more I keep hearing this, I feel like maybe this is the need. Maybe they don't need me as much as their event planner or their creative director anymore. Maybe they need me taking care of them, helping them take care of themselves. And so that's where I pivoted. And I said, you know what? I just really feel led because I keep hearing people say this. And then I would share with them things that I was doing, and they would be like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. That's so great. Like, kind of give me more of what you're saying, what you're doing. And that just was like, the business kind of created out of that, out of the need.
Yeah. I'm smiling because I relate to that so much, because the reason this podcast started was similarly like hearing so many of the same stories, either
Mm-hmm.
through friendships or through my work as a therapist. And I just kept hearing all the same stories. And I'm like, well, wait a
Yeah.
minute, there's something here. And there's, again, this like gap that needs to be filled. And I think for anyone listening, if we're talking about like the courage to pivot or make the step, it's tuning in and sort of really listening to where there's a void, where you can fill the void. I think it's, with a lot of my clients, I'm always like, again, it's all this outside external noise. I'm always like, you're
Yes.
really clear on what you want, but it gets so muddled when you start listening to external voices, whether that be, the overarching societal voice, parents' voice, who's ever the
Yeah.
voice. I think really, and I'm curious your thoughts on this too. Like, I think deep down under all the layers, like if we allow ourselves, we're kind of know what we want or can get clear on what we want, but it's all the extra noise that really keeps us from hearing that and feeling that and
Oh
acting.
my gosh. Yes. No, I'm sorry. Please, like you're hitting the nail on the head right there when you say that. And it's funny because it's one of those things where um I have a coaching group that's going on right now, and one of the things that we're working through is a book that it was very transformative for me. But there's a line in the book that I love because when you were just saying about like knowing what you really want, like I think, many of us do. And so the author, Jen Sincero, she says something
Oh
along,
yeah, name the book here just for everybody that's listening.
sure, the book is You Are a Badass,
Great book.
by
Love
great
that
book,
book.
right? Like
Yeah.
that's her first one. She has a series,
Mhm.
but that one is like the one that just continues to speak to me. That and at making money. You're a badass at making money.
I
But
picked that book. I have to read that book. I have it. I can see it right here. I picked
please
it
read
up
it.
two or three
Read it.
times. I know I have to make
This is your sign today.
okay. Okay.
To read the book because if you liked you'll love, like, she just chef's kiss.
Yeah. Yeah.
But needless to say, she says in there about knowing what you truly want, being clear about what you truly want versus what you think you should want.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's what you're talking about. I think many of us are clear, like you said, about what we want, but what we sometimes are clear about is what we think we should want. I don't know if always we're clear about what we actually do want. We're clear
Yeah.
about what we think we should want. Like, I should want this kind of career. I should want this kind of family dynamic. I should want this. But that's why you see people uncomfortable in their jobs or in their, circumstances, because they're like, I'm doing what I thought I should want. And this actually wasn't what I really wanted.
I know. Well, the word should in my practice, if you are ever to come across any of my clients, former clients, that is the word they know. They are like not allowed to say
Okay.
in our space. It's
Yes.
the word should. And it's funny as I work with people, they'll be like, and they're like, shit, I can't say that. But it's such it holds so much. I feel that word holds so much weight,
Mhm.
and that
Mhm.
word elicits so many emotions that don't feel good.
Yeah.
Because when you are in conflict with what you actually want and what you should want, that's shame could come up, like doubt could come up. Yeah. So I sort of ban my clients from using that
That's
word.
great that you do.
Yeah, I just think it again, it has so much weight to it, and
Yeah.
it's never really connected to what I never have seen it really be truly authentically connected to what people actually
Mm.
want.
Mhm.
Um, I also think, and what you were saying too, is like we follow the shoulds, right? I grew up, kind of the path is carved out of what we should
Yeah.
do. And it like the traditional sense of like college education, job after college, marriage, kids,
Yep.
etc. And I remember getting to my first job out of college, and I'm like, why did everybody tell me this is what I should do? This is horrible. This is like
Same.
so horrible. So I think we're truly misled. I love seeing sort of like the direction in things going, because I think we're, and this is the intention of this podcast, like normalizing other path. I'd be curious to learn more about you. Yeah. Like, did you follow like how you grew up, or was that like
Sure.
sort of what was
So
up for you?
no, so I grew up in a single parent household. My mom worked extremely hard to make sure um, that I had the best of things. And so I went to private school and went from private school to public, but like I guess one of the top, ranking public schools because my mom was like, okay, if you want to go back into public school for high school, like you'll have to go into like one of the top public schools because I just want you to have things that I couldn't have or didn't have and access to. And so um, even though there wasn't a path carved out for me, I think the path was always greatness. There
Mm,
was always a path of, I want you to be great in whatever it is that you do. And I want to do as best as I can from what I can do to help you be that. And so it wasn't do this, be this. However, I went to a high school that was science or engineering. So I studied science. And I just assumed that I should go into the medical field because I'm studying science. And that's what I saw when they brought in people to speak to us at school, professional day. It was it was doctors, lawyers, engineers. It was all of these kind of very amazing roles, but kind of limited. I didn't know that there was more out there. And so when I went to college, I studied science. So I got a degree in general science with a concentration in biology because that is what I believed I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go to medical school after this. I'm supposed to be a doctor because what else do you do with science, right? What else is there? Unbeknowing. And I called my mom like junior year in college and I said, actually, I think I don't want to be a doctor. I think I want to study fashion. And so she said, oh, that's wonderful. Well, you're going to get the degree that I paid for, which is the science degree. So what you do after these 4 years, she's like, that's up to you. But this is going to be a science degree. And so that was the only like real thing she like forced upon me. And I get it. She's like, listen, for 3 years, we've been paying for this much.
yeah.
Yeah. So it makes sense. So I did. And
But
then
even
once I,
in college, like it's hard to pivot. I think it's hard to pivot. There's not, and I wonder if I'm curious if that's changed since. But I remember similar moment my junior year.
Mhm.
Part of the requirements to graduate was like 2 lab sciences. So junior year, just to fill the requirement, I took a psychology class, and now I've already declared my major. I'm focused on
Okay.
business economics because everyone told me that's what I'm supposed to do or should do.
Mm.
And I took this psychology class and I loved it. And obviously,
Ah,
I found my way back there
sure.
many years later, many paths later. But like, if there was room to switch then, I would have. But you're kind of like,
Yeah.
well, I'm down this path so far. I guess I have to stay with this path.
You are. You are. You stay with the path or you add some extra years to college and decide, okay, you become the forever student, trying to get, and it was just like, no, I don't want to be here any longer. I'm not because I didn't enjoy college. I loved it, but I was like, there's more that I want to do. And so I decided to go to art school after I graduated from college and study fashion marketing. And so I did not finish that degree because I couldn't afford to, because at this point I was an adult taking care of everything myself. And I was like, I gotta work. And this is way expensive. So it hurt my heart because I was excelling in it, but it was just like, no. And then I went to work for a major retailer. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be like a fashion buyer. That's the way I'll get into fashion, and unbeknown to me, like those jobs do not come easily. And so like you got to start on the sales floor forever. And I
Mm,
was just like, I'm not a salesperson. And I did that for 3 years. And I kept changing roles. And so at the time I lived away. I lived in North Carolina and I decided to move back home to Baltimore, Maryland. Um, because I was just like, I don't feel like I'm finding what it is I need to be doing here. And I came back and I got a job as a project manager. And so had never done this before. And so, but I was always into details. And so it worked. But while I was there, I was always the person in my office who was planning the events at our office. Like my office was the kind that they celebrated if you got the cast off your arm. They're like, oh, so and so got their cast off. Let's have a party today. It was like any and everything.
Oh, that's
And
kind
I
of
was always the person like, Candice, will you put it together? And I'm like, okay, all right. And I realized there's something there. And I was like, there's something here with this. And I need to tap into this. I need to pay attention to a pattern that's happening. And I went to a networking event and met an event planner at the time. And I said to her, I said, I find myself, even though I'm a project manager, I'm at my job like doing events. And she was like, well, you do know event planning is 90% project management. You're managing a project. And it like kind of just, I
Mm,
had this moment. And I asked her if I could intern for her while I worked my 9 to 5 as a project manager. Could I intern on the weekends for her wedding firm? Because I just want to see what this event world is like. And I did that for a year, no pay. So I sacrificed a lot of time. But I said, you know what? I think I want to go into events. And I kind of became an accidental entrepreneur because I didn't even know I wanted to be. And that's how that spawned out of that. And so she said, well, let's start a business together. I want to get out of weddings. I want to do like non-wedding related events. And so how would you like to partner? And so my mentor became my business partner. And that's how my event planning for 11 plus years spawned out of that. But I tell people all the time, it was a lot of crooked paths that just led me straight to where I needed to be. And I think it's completely okay to pivot as many times as you need to until you find your footing.
totally.
You
Totally.
know,
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love the crooked paths. That was my journey too. I mean, after finance, I was a forever student taking a master's in PR, corporate communications, and then a master's in school counseling, and then a master. Like I kept trying. And I tell people that, in the trying, there is learning.
absolutely.
We might learn what we don't like, but we're going to learn something. And
That's right.
I feel like with a lot of the stuckness is like this lack of willingness to try. And I think that your story is testament to that. Like you tried your path, like pivoted a lot of times. You tried many
Yeah.
different things.
And
And
there's a
that
level of
intuition, like
yes,
tuning.
yes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. There's a level of where your faith has to become bigger than your fear.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Okay, it's one of the topics I want to talk about today.
Okay.
You have a lot of reels on like trust and faith, and I think we mentioned this off while we were not
Yeah.
recording. Just the way you use like you use analogies in your content is
Mhm.
so like I think so impactful. So you use the analogy of the puzzle pieces of like.
Mhm.
Well, I guess it's in two ways. It's also trust and faith, but also like things don't have to happen in order. So I'd love for you to
Correct.
speak to that.
Yeah. So again, I'm always my first case study, I feel like. So I'm thinking about my own life and how I've gotten to this point right here. There's so much more that I feel like I'd like to do and to try, try at, but it didn't happen in order. As we talked about here, I just shared, just a brief piece of my own journey. None of this happened in quote unquote order. And so, but it still was in order, and I think a lot of times when we're looking at a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle, and you're putting together, sometimes you start with the corners or the edge of the puzzle, right? Sometimes some people start with the center, they put those pieces together. Some people start with just random little pockets, like they put like a little pocket together, a little pocket here, and then they bring them all together. But essentially, it's all making one big picture. And I think a lot of times in our own lives, that's what's happening. Sometimes things are coming together, just the corners. Some things are the center. Some things are those little pockets that will ultimately all mesh together. And what all we can do is focus on the pieces that we do have access to, the pieces that we do know fit and work together
Mm,
versus trying to put the pieces that we don't know fit or work. Because essentially they're going to fit. We're going to see which piece is missing, right? So instead of trying to find the missing piece, work with the pieces that are clearly there, visible, easily able to be
together.
put together, right? And just let it build its own self. Um, versus stressing yourself out to try to build something that, is not time. It's not time for you to find that peace yet.
I think that's a hard thing to stay grounded in. I'll say
Oh, it
personally,
is. It
I
is.
struggle with staying grounded in, I wholeheartedly believe in all of that. Like I do. I will admit that I struggle with staying grounded in that because
Hmm.
sometimes the pieces I want them right now, and I don't understand why I'm not getting them right now.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if you have any ways, strategies, techniques, practices you do that allow you to stay grounded in trust and faith and patience and also gratitude. I love how you said, like, look at the pieces that you have. And this is why I love the analogies, because I'm almost like visualizing doing a puzzle and stepping back and seeing
Hmm.
the whole,
Yeah.
like it's coming together. Like, so
Yeah.
I'm curious, yeah, for you, if there's ways, if you also struggle with that, or if there's ways that you stay grounded in trust and having that patience to know that the pieces are coming together as they should.
Hmm. Yeah. So I absolutely do, like anybody else, struggle. I don't think I struggle as much. I think, like you start to learn a little bit more. So the struggle doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's not nearly the same. It's like stage fright. Like when you first stepped on a stage, probably that first time was like, but as you've done it 700 times now,
Mhm.
there's still a level of fright, but it's not the same fright you had the very first time, right? It kind of lessens a little bit. And I think that's what happens over time for me. I feel like a lot of the fails have helped me to say, at this point, you have no choice but to trust because you got so many fails under your belt. It's like, I think that has really helped, kind of, believe it or not, lessen the fear. A number of the fails have helped me to lessen the fear because it's like, but you got through that, and I often tell
Yeah.
people, I tell my clients, you need to check your life receipts. We get through
Mm.
things and we forget to look at the life receipts. So that's one of the techniques I use to keep me anchored, is looking at my life receipts. And so much so, I created what's called a remember when box. And the remember when can be either way, WIN or WHEN, right? Remember when this happened,
Love
or remember
that.
wins that have happened. And I have things in this box, whether it's a ticket stub, a picture, a note, um, a lanyard, things that, a book, like things that remind me of when I was in a certain place, whether it was an actual like grand accomplishment win, or when you went through this, but you got through this. And
Mm,
so I open that up because that's physically my life receipts right there.
I
And
love
that helps me to stay anchored because I'm a visual person, which is why I oftentimes use analogies, because I think it will help to connect for people something visually.
totally, totally.
And so having that helps me to stay anchored, but also recognizing the analogies also help me. So when I think about trusting the process, I said this recently about a cake.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one. That was that's on the here to ask you
It's
about.
on the,
Oh my
it's
God.
it's
It's
a
so,
cake, right? So when you put the cake in the oven, the cake goes in there batter, but you have to leave a cake for a certain amount of time, right? You can't do a whole lot of moving and hard stomping or anything like that, and because you're going to shift the cake and you're going to interrupt the process.
hmm.
So if I take it out too soon, I interrupt the process. It doesn't become a full cake. If I do too much movement, or if I do too much extra around it while it's in the oven, I can interrupt the process. And so it's one of those things, I have to put the cake in and I have to step away. And I have to trust that in the time it's supposed to be in there, that it's going to come out the
Mm,
way it's supposed to. So I feel like I look at things, I'm really good about trying to look at life as my teacher and how to stay anchored. I look at a cocoon. I look at a butterfly in a cocoon, right? The butterfly takes a certain amount of time, but when it comes out, it's beautiful. And so I'm like, why do I think all these other things have a process and I shouldn't?
I love that. Yeah, that you're hitting all the ones I saw yesterday that I was like, damn, I'm gonna talk about this. Um, yeah, for me, the baking the cake really I resonated with so much. I felt for me in my life, in my journey, my current like fertility journey, Like and I've talked about this on here, it's like impatience didn't serve me at all. In fact,
Yeah.
it hurt me. So just this idea of being able to stay patient, to trust the process, to trust the way the puzzle's coming together, I think is so important. I've seen that play out in my life, and I'm sure people listening can really resonate with that. I think what could be hard too, and I know you touch upon this in your content, is
Yeah.
that comparison piece, right? Like someone's baking a different cake, someone's
Yeah.
doing a different puzzle.
Yep.
And how do we, or maybe how do you suggest people stay focused on their cake and their puzzle? Because again, that external noise like screws up so much.
Oh
So
my
much. It
gosh.
doesn't allow us to be connected to our process. I think it takes away, it makes it harder to stay patient. It makes it harder to not, to trust and let go of
Yeah.
control. But yeah, how would you suggest people work on not comparing?
So I think as long as we're human, that there is parts of the us that want to lean into that. And I think it's more about managing it versus trying to just like eliminate it, because I think it's just a human way of being to want to see what others are doing or how they're doing it. And so I find myself trying to manage it versus trying to be like, let me get rid of it. Because then if it does reappear, you're upset, you're frustrated, you feel like, I thought I was over this. It's like stress. Stress happens. Stress is a thing. Manage it. Don't try to eliminate it. It's going to happen. So in my thoughts when it comes to comparison syndrome, I say glance, right, at people, but don't stare.
Mhm.
Because when you stare, you compare.
Oh, I got that.
So there's nothing wrong with glancing over at what someone else is doing to get an understanding. Competitors have to do that, right? Like big grocery stores have to look at what the other grocery store is doing so that when they set up their grocery store, they can have a good, kind of healthy competitive prices and products and all of these things. Why should people shop here versus going there? So it's necessary in some cases to glance, but when you sit there and stare, is
Mhm.
when you start going in your head and down these rabbit holes and start piecemealing or picking yourself apart versus if I glance, I don't have enough of their story to hold on to that I can pick myself apart from, right? Whereas if I look over, and so again, I have analogy that I often use. I got a
Tell us.
million analogies, but when you're driving, you drive looking forward. You don't drive looking at the side. You don't like stare. You glance in your mirrors, right? You glance
Yeah, or
in
you're
your rearview
crashing.
mirror or you're going to crash.
Yeah.
Same concept. You will crash if you stare. So the goal is to glance in the mirrors, glance at other people, glean from it, get what you need, take it, but don't sit there and focus on it because if you do, it's going to take you through these things that you don't want to go through. So I tell people, like, if that means a social media, if that means you need to, mute some accounts, if that means you need to unfollow until you've gotten to a place where your business is where you want it to be. And so now you feel like this person is a colleague or, a competitor versus someone that you're like, in that you're feel like they're so above you or so beyond you. If it comes to hanging around people, maybe it means that you can't hang out as much with these people because it makes you feel some kind of way until you get to a place where you feel better about your situation or your circumstances. So if you feel like you're struggling financially and you're going out with people who are seeming to be well financially, and so they're buying everything, but you are looking at them like, well, why can't I buy? Then
Mhm.
maybe you don't need to hang out. Doesn't mean they can't be friends, but maybe you need to hang out differently. Maybe it
Yeah.
just needs to be a video call or a FaceTime or a phone call. And right now we can't hang out in person. Not about you, because I need to get to a place where I
Yeah.
feel better about me.
I love that. And I think that, what you said earlier about the staring, like sometimes we're even if we're staring, we're just getting a piece of the vision,
True. Very
right?
true.
So even if it's like we're going down the rabbit hole on somebody's social media, like we're still not getting the full
Oh
picture.
no, you're getting a very like 2%, right? And then you always keep the word seemingly in your mind. I always tell people keep the word seeming, like, so it is seemingly like their business is thriving, right? Like, again, It very well may be, but it also may, you don't know. To your point, you have a 90-second video or a 2-minute vlog. And so seemingly from what you're able to see, this is what you're seeing, right? But understand, and you can't want someone's heaven without wanting their hell, right? And this is not about like believing in heaven or hell, but just kind of you can't want their good without having to navigate their bad. So
Yeah.
yeah, they may be jet setting across the world, but maybe they're jet setting because staying home is hard for them because they are lonely or
Right.
they're grieving. And so being out makes them feel better. Like you have no idea what the totality of the puzzle is. You're seeing the edges, the corners, right? You
Yeah.
don't see the whole piece.
I think that what it gets so hard without sort of this clarity and leaning into what we want is that I do think people are more susceptible to comparison, right? For example, if I'm really clear on, you know, I don't want a relationship in my early 30s. I want to focus on my career. You might not get on social media and look at everybody that's in a relationship. And
Very true.
so I think going back to what we said earlier is like allowing yourself to get really clear on what you want. And so when you see someone else have something that you don't even want, it won't elicit that same feeling. I love the
Yeah.
cleansing too, because I think there could be, as a therapist, I think there's always like lessons popping up everywhere. And if we
Yeah.
tune in, it's something is telling us something, something is a cue. And I love
Hmm.
the glancing because I think if you're glancing, you can get the cue of like, okay, what is this telling me? Like, why am I comparing to this person? Instead of you're staring, you're feeling bad and you're missing like why it's coming up for you. So I love the concept of glance, don't stare.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're right. And as far as like truly knowing who you are, and I think it's about being clear on who you are and what you want, but being anchored in that.
Yeah, you have to.
Because you also like, if you're not anchored, and when I say anchored, meaning like true and through, you're not being moved. When something is anchored, it can't be moved, right? It's
Mhm.
like in place. What you believe about the life that you desire, the life that you want, whatever career, professionally or personally, you have to be anchored in that. Doesn't mean that you can't, change over time or whatever have you, but in that season, wherever you are, that version of yourself, be anchored in that so that you're not swayed. Because even if
Mhm.
you're clear, even if if you're not anchored in that, it can be swayed, right? A boat can be swayed. I mean, I can be on this boat, but if it doesn't have an anchor, if a good wind comes by, which is I saw something, now it's like making me question, is this actually what I want? You're you can start moving versus I saw it. I think that's great for them.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome for the life that they desire. I think that that works well. Like they want to own 3 chimpanzees. I think that's great for them, right? But when you're
Yeah.
doing that, part of being anchored is how do you do that is by knowing what your life entails.
Yeah. Yeah. I use a similar analogy with clients and for myself is a tree analogy of a tree and the roots being
Yes, the
being that
roots.
the roots being your values, the roots being the things that you desire, like the roots being the things that are unmovable and
Yeah,
the branches and the leaves are the things that like, yeah, we could have some flexibility with things. So but to your point of the anchor, those being the things that like I am clear on this, I am grounded in this, like nothing is swaying me from these things. And I think it's just having that, again, when we're talking about societal expectations and narratives or, ingrained
yeah,
messaging we heard growing up, it's, getting to a place where there's an invitation to create your own roots, an invitation to understand what your anchor is. And I love that now kind of I think we are moving towards that, where there's more
yeah.
ideas of what you can be besides a doctor or a lawyer or like I love that there's just I didn't have that growing up, and I'm glad that we are, but I think it's this invitation to like even think about what those things are.
Yeah, like in the invitation, and so there are two things you were saying about the anchor, which I love about the roots. I think our roots are our core values.
Hmm.
Like knowing like you can want what you want because those align with your core values. So that person's life, does that life that you see in them align with your core values of what you want for you? Second, when you were just saying about like infinite possibilities, I think we're starting to see life differently versus before, or our generations before us was like, get a job, make money. But now it's like, how can I contribute to the greater good of this society?
Yeah.
And so that is how different kinds of occupations are coming out of that. Because before we thought the only way to contribute to this world was being a this. But now it's like,
Yep.
well, people need encouragement. So maybe I can, use my gift of speaking to encourage people. And maybe that can come via, you know, motivational speaking or showing up on a digital platform and creating videos that someone can play on their ride to work
Yeah.
or play while they're at home with their kids, taking care of life. How is it that you are using your gifts to add to this world? And I think that's where it's changing, is that before we saw things as just a job, but we're hearing things like purpose, alignment,
Yes. Yeah.
gift. And
Yeah.
now it's like, how do I take that, add to the world? How do I, as I like to say, make impact and income?
Oh, yes. Gosh,
Because
yeah.
that's what I'm very clear about. I tell people, like, I love being able to make an impact, but I also want to make an income so that I can keep showing up to make an impact. Right. So I actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to be able to have a little food in the grocery, my refrigerator. I'd like to be able to have a nice place to lay my head. And so the more these are just things I need in order to be able to keep making the impact. And so I think we're getting to a place now where we're seeing not just about a check or a job or even a career. It's like, what do you feel divinely
Hmm.
purposed to
Yeah.
do? What do you feel? And that's where that pivot for me was like, I was feeling very led, didn't even know what was on the other side, but I felt like I think women need someone um, to just kind of speak to them about them, and
Totally.
not from a judgment place, not from a place of I judge you, but I see you. I hear you,
Yeah.
I value you, and I want you to do the same for yourself. I want you to see yourself. I want you to hear yourself. I want you to value yourself. And so how can I transfer that to you?
And again, I think it's that invitation to be able to do that, think about that, because I just think sort of what life requires of
Yeah.
women and for us to do and
Yeah.
get up and get going and be resilient and be strong and manage all the things and do, we just, I think we're incredible and we have a lot of roles and we have to show up a lot of places. And I think it is someone like you saying, hey, wait a minute, no, I don't want to know about your business or your family. I want to know about
You.
you. And
I
I,
think your kids are great. I think they're wonderful, but I'm not concerned about them at this moment. Like
I
you actually are a person independent of them as much as they are dependent on you, but you are a person independent of them, of your spouse, of your kids, of your family. I understand you're a caregiver, but how are you caring for you? And so having a voice, that's like the reminder that you need to have, and I feel like that's kind of what I became, or I've become, or
oh
um,
my gosh. Yeah.
evaporating into, that I'm just like, it's taking its own life form. And what's funny is that I listen to my own videos
Right. You're
because
like, okay, I
sometimes,
need a little like, okay, how do
yeah,
I be
yeah,
patient?
that day I needed to remind myself, like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what? You need a timeout because you're easily irritated today. And so you need to go, like, unplug. You need to, like, take no more calls today. You need to just go eat, maybe go on a walk, maybe do something that's going to add a little dopamine to yourself, right? Give you that good old boost. Um, but I think it's important to have people that are helping us care about ourselves,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
to your point, we're not taught to do that. We're not.
No. Well, that's another, I know we're running out of time. I have so much I want
Yeah.
to talk about, but it's sort of like transitions to one of the other things. I saw you have a lot of reels on and talk about quite a bit, which is friendship. And
Mm-hmm.
I think friendship at any stage is
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, but it can be complex. And I think as we get older, it can be harder. And I think also in your 30s, when, in your 40s too, but for me, I'll speak personally for me, in my 30s, I guess the 30s, there's so much pressure to meet these milestones. And that's quite sort of
Mm-hmm.
feels like the decade where those things are supposed to be
Okay.
happening. And so I feel like, you have this trajectory where kind of in your 20s, everybody's in the same place, phase, like finding jobs,
Yeah.
like getting there, getting grounded, whatever. 30s, it's like people are pairing up, people are getting engaged. And, I think it can be hard to navigate friendships when you're in different stages of life.
Yeah.
I had posted last night because my son is starting preschool. It's a new school for us,
Oh,
like the back to school.
oh, back to school night or something.
And I was like nervous. I'm like, I want to make some friends. I want to make some mom
Oh,
friends. And I just
yeah.
think, friendship female friendship is so important. And I know you put a lot of reels up on friendship. So I did want to talk a little bit about that and sort of your thoughts on maintaining friendships,
Yeah.
navigating maybe friendship loss.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yes, because I've had both. I have friendships that I've been able to maintain, and I have friendships that I've lost. Beautiful friendships,
Same. Yeah.
and I feel like when it comes to friendships, I was having this conversation the other day with a friend, and I said, we can't put expectations on our friends to be everything for us, meaning one friend can't be all things.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's okay to have kind of what I like to call compartmentalized friendships, where I kind of talk to this friend about like professional type of things because I feel like they just get it. I feel like there's a synergy that happens when we talk about that. And so they're like my person I go to because we're sharing back for they're talking about theirs. And doesn't mean we don't talk about other things, but they're like, that friend that I just go to like about work and business and stuff like that. But then they're friends I feel like are a little bit more of my confidant friends because I feel like they have um they just know how to keep things, right? Just they're very much so not gossipers. They're not going to go around like, oh, I'm not going to say anything. And then they're like, okay, did you know, so it's okay to have different type of friends. I feel like based on where you are and what your needs are, and vice versa for them. And like anything, friendships are relationships and they take work. And so you have to make a decision on what are your values when it comes to friendship? What does that look like for you? And I think it's important in friendships to have that conversation with your friend. What do we value here in this friendship?
Yeah.
Um, because sometimes it's not that you lost that friend because you all fell out or whatever. Your values weren't the same. How you all valued that friendship or friendship as a whole wasn't the same. And so
Or
it doesn't mean you
changes
need,
somewhere along the way.
yeah, it changes. And so just like in relationships, like, with your significant other, you got to check in or like, hey, we are we still the same, we still on the same kind of playing field that we were 12 years ago, are things still like we need to check in. I mean, I think you should check in before 12 years, but I'm just saying, are we still on the same playing field from last week? I don't know. But with your friends, you should kind of do the same thing, like at our jobs or at companies, they do reviews,
Yeah.
they do these reviews. And it's like, do a review of your friendship.
I love that. Yeah.
Do a friendship review and together you all do that, right? Like you're not just sitting there judging. It's like, hey, this is kind of what we said we wanted to base our friendship off of and where we were and the things. Like, are we still there? We both said we wanted to kind of like hold each other accountable, support each other, push each other towards our goals. Do we feel like we're doing that?
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Similar to you, I think what you said resonated too about like sort of managing the expectations and of friendships. And I do this
Yeah.
exercise with clients. I call it the friendship pyramid and kind of like
Oh,
getting clear on who goes where on the pyramid.
I
And
love that.
on the top
Yes.
is like your ride or die people, like
Yeah.
fully be yourself. You can trust them to
Yes.
keep secrets or whatever.
Right.
And like moving down the pyramid and it's interesting when I do this exercise with people, they have everybody in the wrong place. They hurt
Mm,
and the friendships aren't fulfilling because they're expecting like an acquaintance to like meet the expectations of a ride or die. So
love that.
I love what yeah, it
Mm,
resonated with you when you said like expectations and not everything is going to be, not everyone. It's some friends might be just the people you go grab a drink with and like
exactly.
hang with, but they're not going to be the person you call when something exciting
That's
or
it.
devastating happens. So yeah,
That's it.
that resonated, like managing the expectation of the friendships.
And adult friendships are, definitely can be tough because as we evolve, sometimes the friendship doesn't.
Right.
And I think coming to grips with that, we don't talk enough about friendship grief, because there is a such thing as grieving friendships. And I think it's okay to do that. I think it's okay to say, I feel I am hurting. I am, you're acknowledging that this was a part of you, that this was someone that you held dear,
Mhm.
that you cared about. Again, it's a relationship. And so there's a piece of you that is, kind of you're losing. And so it doesn't mean that you necessarily are trying to bring the friendship back, or, you realize it doesn't need to be, brought back to get, brought back together. But at the same time, acknowledging like um, I lost something, that was valuable to me. And so but it also doesn't mean that something else valuable won't come along. And I think when it comes to adult friendships, not forcing friendships is key, and really just, what we said about being clear about what you desire in an adult friendship.
Yeah.
Like when you're out there looking for new friends, people's like, I want new friends and things like that. And it's like, that's cool. But are you clear about that? Because then you open yourself up and you're like, well, I got friends. You said you wanted friends. And so the universe is like, here you go. Here's a whole pile of them.
Right,
But
right.
you're like, I can't use that person because I can't deal with that. So be clear about what kind of friends you want in your life. What are your core values, and what kind of friendships are you looking to have? Because maybe it might be those friends already exist, but to your point, maybe they're going to change up on your pyramid.
Yeah, and accepting that's okay if they change on the pyramid. I've seen that, and doing this exercise with clients, like it happens. And I think as long as you're clear on that and you can
Yeah.
accept that change and you can manage that expectation, that's okay. Someone introduced this idea to me, which I love, this idea of like cutting the cord on relationships. And it doesn't mean that the relationship has to end, but like if it's
Okay.
shifted and the values don't align anymore, it's like cutting the cord on that old relationship to start a new relationship with the same person. So I love
I
that.
love that. I
Yeah,
love
I
that
did
too.
too. I love that because it's like I don't have to like get rid of this person in my life. I just have to like cut the cord on that.
Ooh, I've got an analogy for you, Beth.
Yes, I love your analogies.
When you just said that, it just made me like, I don't even know why my mind goes here, but it made me think about cutting your hair, like dead ends on your hair,
See, that's
right? Like
your mind
you're
work.
not, my
Awesome.
mind just works that
Yeah.
way, because I'm like, to your point about cutting a cord, like you're not cutting all of your hair off, right? You're just cutting the part that no longer serves you, which is the dead ends,
You got
so
to make
that
a
you
reel
can.
on that. You got to make a
I
reel on
do. I gotta make a reel so that your hair can grow, right? So that your hair can grow healthier. And so sometimes with the
that.
cutting of the cord, it's like we've got to cut on this version of who we
Yes.
were, so that we can have this newer version, that's much, that's healthier, that's better, that's thriving, whatever it is. Um, because of that. And like you said, you're not starting over, but we're just kind of starting differently, And
Mhm.
so it just made me think about that when you
I'll be
said that.
looking out for that reel.
Know that it came from here. It was inspired by you.
I'm honored. I'm so honored. Okay, one last question. I really
Sure.
like, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I
Same.
like resonated so much. I've already did with your content, but I'm so grateful to have a conversation with you.
Great.
What do women have to look forward to in their 40s?
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. There's so much that I feel like. So I'm 44. And I oftentimes just say 40 over because I'm still in the 40s. And so
Mhm.
instead of like dating a reel that's like 44, I'm always like 40 and over, until I'm in the 50s and over. But I would say one of the biggest things that I personally feel like women have to look forward to is this level of self-awareness that starts to
Mm,
happen. Um, Even if you're not trying, there's just some kind of internal switch that goes on, and that you start just becoming more aware of yourself. That's not always just like aware of the good things, though.
right, right.
Aware of your crap, because we all got it, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Like, you know what? I I gotta change that because that's not serving me.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and aware of your good stuff, right? And so I think this level of awareness would just makes you feel more comfortable in your skin because you're knowing yourself more. Like you're finally getting to a place where you can confidently say, I know myself.
Mhm.
Because I'm able to say, I know the parts of me where I'm like, let me go sit in a timeout. No one needs this version of me today. No one, self included. But I also am able to say, these are the things that, I'm really good at, or these
Mm.
are the things that I'm really working through. These are the places and spaces in my life, dot, dot, dot. So I feel like you have this level of self-awareness. If you've ever been in this place, especially my 20, my 30-year-olds who are like, I want to know myself. Let me
Yeah.
tell you something. You're going to get to know more of yourself in your 40s, and it just happens. It's like with our cycle, right? Like your
Oh,
your
yeah.
cycle. It just happened. It just you didn't try to make your cycle start. It just one day you woke up and you were like, oh, so now I have a menstrual cycle. That's how I feel about self-awareness. It's going to be one day just like, oh, I now take my rose-colored glasses off and see myself differently.
Yeah. And I think, when you're in that space of more self-awareness, you can look
Yeah.
back at your 20s and your 30s and see all the like crooked paths that taught you so much. And I think there's then this appreciation you have for all those trials
Mhm.
and tribulations that you went through in those days. Yeah. I mean, I'm 43 now, so I truly relate to what you're saying. Like it all starts to make so much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a new lens. You have a completely different lens.
You do. You just kind of wake up and you're like, wow. And that's when the growth, I really like the next level growth and evolution just kind of starts happening. And then you also have a community of women who will get it.
Oh
Like you
my
have
God.
that to look forward to. You have the number of women that, again, I've created, a whole profile about this, my platform now. You start to relate to people no matter like specific age. You're in your 40s, you get it, right? You background doesn't matter, ethnicity, race doesn't matter, gender, sex. You start to connect with people and they're like, oh, it's like this our own little society that you're just like, you too, oh my gosh, right? And you'll
Thought I was
have
so
these
little.
moments. So if you ever felt like you were alone, I guess I'm saying in your 20s or in your 30s, you will feel, I feel like, less alone, especially in the day and age of social media, because there are women in their 40s that are all venturing kind of the same spaces and places. And so you'll start feeling less like it's just me going through this. And
Mhm.
you're going to feel like, oh, so other people go through this too. Whereas in my 20s and 30s, I kind of felt like I was on this island by myself in certain ways. But now, like in my 40s, I don't necessarily feel like that because there's so many women that have said to me, oh my gosh, me too. I felt that.
Yeah, and I think that self-awareness breeds more confidence in self, and that allows people to be more vulnerable. So,
Hmm.
I think in our 20s and 30s, we could relate, and I think more women are starting to share, but like people aren't as open or as vulnerable. And I think that self-awareness allows us to feel comfortable being more vulnerable. And from that place, like there's connection, there's relatability, there's understanding.
Hmm. Spoken
Lots.
like a true therapist. See how you see how you connected the dots. This is why I appreciate therapists. I'm like,
Oh, thank you.
I genuinely do. People say, would you ever? I'm like, no, I would never. I know
You're
you said
doing
should
it
never say
though.
never.
You're well,
But I
never say
like
never. Yeah.
But I love the lane of a therapist. I have a therapist and I believe in it. And I think being able to put like just the professional sense on things, right? And being able to give people the background of things or delving deeper or going deeper. And so I feel like I get to kind of start this planting of seeds for
Mm.
people.
Yeah.
And someone else, like a therapist or a psychiatrist, whoever you're working with, gets to come along and keep watering those seeds and nurturing that. And so I appreciate just being able to be a part of the garden, the
Well,
blossoming.
there wouldn't be any deeper work if there wasn't a seed planted. So I cannot thank you enough for being here and having this conversation. I can't thank you enough for all the content that you're putting out. I
Thank you.
think it is so helpful, so incredible. Keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing. And just
Thank
quickly
you.
tell everyone, if you're not following Candice, you have to be following Candice. So tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm always hanging out on Instagram at Candice Denise, Candice with an I. And I'm also on TikTok, and it's by Candice Denise. So BY Candice Denise.
Okay. Great. Go follow her. She's amazing. Candice, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Beth. It was my honor.
If you're someone struggling or relating to the topics that we're talking about now, and you're feeling the anxiety or the stress or the pressure of feeling like you're running out of time, you're behind, and you want some extra support, check out my group therapy practice in Midtown Manhattan, NYC Therapeutic Wellness. We have an amazing team of clinicians ready to support you in your journey, to help you feel more grounded, to help you feel more grateful, to help you feel like you're just exactly where you need to be. So check us out at www.nyctherapeuticwellness.com. Hey guys, I'm Beth. Thank you so much for tuning in to Quiet the Clock. If you want to hear more episodes and learn more about how to dismantle societal timelines, live life on your own terms, live life fully and authentically, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and you can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Quiet the Clock Pod. You guys, I'm really excited. We just created all this amazing merch. And so if you're loving the podcast and you want to support our cause and continue to hear amazing episodes, please support us by buying some merch. I am living in these sweatshirts every day. We have a range of colors. We have hoodies, we have mugs, we have hats, we have journals. We have all of the things. And I love having them on because it's just a reminder to quiet the clock, to slow down, to let life unfold and be happy. So there's meaning and purpose behind wearing it too, which is a nice reminder. So check out our website, quiettheclock.com, to get your merch.